So it's episode number 282 with Hamish, or also known as Andrew, his real name, Hamish Mills from PRG. And if you don't know Hamish's story on how he got named, we actually talk about that today. We talk about that. We talk about his incredible history in the business, just working with the best companies, doing some of the best tours. I would say he's probably very good and also very fortunate and lucky because he has sort of checked all the boxes. The biggest, best companies, LSD, PRG, lots of three-letter companies, PRG, LSD, VER, Vari-Lite. And, he's done some really great things and has a very important role at Vari-Lite as well. So enjoyable guy, great story, and a lot of fun. So I hope you like it. Hello, thanks for joining me for episode number 282 of Gears of Gear. Today's podcast is brought to you by the Event Safety Alliance. Safety should never be far from center stage. The Event Safety Alliance is North America's leading association for event and venue professionals who care about safety, security, and risk management. ESA focus on all the things that help event professionals work safely and help guests enjoy their events. Through education and training opportunities, expert-developed standards and guidance, and programming on issues affecting safety at live events, ESA empowers event professionals of all stripes to mitigate risks and ensure their well-being and that of their coworkers and guests as well. Because everyone deserves to make it home safely, become a member of the Event Safety Alliance and join thousands of event professionals from around the globe, creating a safer, more prosperous future for our industry. Visit safetyalliance.org for more information. And this podcast is also brought to you by AVL Media Group, one of the leading distributors of professional audio, video, and lighting equipment in North America. Please take just a moment and watch the following video with me.
AVL Media Group, connecting the world's most trusted audio brands with professionals like you. From their large diaphragm studio or versatile handheld live performance mics, Aston microphones deliver clarity and precision. Lab Group and Power amplifies the world. From commercial installs to the biggest tours, Lab Group delivers. Turbo Sound's new Manchester line array, from intimate venues to major festivals, the perfect balance of power and clarity. From the M32 to the groundbreaking HD96, Midas consoles bring exceptional sound quality to regional bands, touring artists, and the largest productions in the world. Wharfdale Pro, engineered for portability and installation. Easy to transport, quick to set up, and available in powered and non-powered versions. Tannoy's commercial speaker range offers indoor and outdoor solutions in black or white, in-ceiling, on-wall, pendant, and innovative column speakers. With dynamic audio control, Tannoy's steerable arrays provide precision and adaptability, perfect for demanding acoustic environments. AVL Media Group, your source for industry-leading audio solutions.
Hello again. And so by the time you hear this, LDI is over. And it was a great show. Fantastic. Actually, I haven't left yet. So it is now Wednesday. I'm recording this on Wednesday right before the LDI show. I leave on Friday. And I actually just changed my trip. I was originally leaving on Saturday. And then a few people wanted to have meetings on Saturday. And what do you mean you have no time? What do you mean you're leaving Tuesday morning? What do you mean you can't have a meeting on Saturday or whatever? So I have changed it, and I am now arriving Friday night late. And so, funny story, I like to stay at a particular hotel. I won't say the name just so that people don't start putting their drink bills on my room or something. But I like to stay at a particular hotel, and it's easy, and there's not a big casino that you got to walk through to get to your room, which is now probably eliminating a lot of hotels and making you focus on one in particular. But I booked it a while ago, and I got this deal where it was like sensible, like $240 a night or something like that. Plus, you know, the ridiculous resort fees. I think it was like $270, including resort fees, maybe. Anyways, whatever it was. So I went to add the one night at the front end, the Friday night at the front end, and I am a VIP member, platinum member, whatever it's called, of that hotel chain. And so I thought, okay, this isn't going to be a problem. You just extend it by one night, same rate. No. Well, first of all, we couldn't extend it by one night. I had to book a separate reservation. Secondly, it's literally more than twice as much money. It's $600 for one night in this place. So guess where Mr. Marcel is staying? I'm staying by the airport in like a Holiday Inn or something, one of those kind of places, Hyatt Place. I don't know what it was, but one of those, one of the lower end hotels of a higher end chain. And I'm perfectly happy with that. I get in at like 11 o'clock at night. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'll go straight to the room, crash, wake up in the morning, and move to a real hotel. And so that's my story. And so by the time you hear this again, you can't say, aha, I caught you, you're at such and such hotel or whatever, because it's already over. So I'm really looking forward to seeing lots and lots of people. Of course, I'm looking forward to Dining with Dinosaurs, which, again, by the time you hear this, will have already been done. It's our inaugural event this year. It's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. I'm getting calls. Like I remember when I used to get calls for concert tickets. I don't get that anymore, but when I used to get calls for concert tickets all the time, I'm getting more calls for can you get me into this dinosaur thing? And I can't. Like, I don't have any passes. They haven't given me anything. I thought I was actually going to have to pay for my own lunch, knowing these wonderful folks at LDI. So yeah, I don't have any passes. But, you know, again, by the time you hear this, you will have known that, because you've probably called my phone 100 times saying, get me into this thing. It's wild. I mean, it feels like, it feels a little bit weirdly viral, and I know I'll get there and only 4 people will show up, but it sure feels like the room's going to be stacked full of people, and it's just going to be a really fun event. And I'm really looking forward to seeing not just the people on our dinosaur list, but a lot of the people who have told me they're coming, like real key people in our industry and stuff. I thought it was just going to be kids. I thought it was going to be students, but no, like, people who've been in the industry a long time and that are almost certifiable dinosaurs. Actually, there are a couple dinosaurs who have told me they're coming. So yeah, looking forward to that. And again, it's a little bit redundant because by the time you hear this, it'll all be over. What else? I got nothing on AI. There's so many things happening with AI right now that I can hardly keep up. And I promise, hopefully next week, I'll give you one of my updates, not only on the things that have happened in the AI world, because a lot of things have happened, but on ways that I'm utilizing AI. I want to get into more of that kind of stuff. Like, how's it changing my life? What are things that I've tried that are really working for me and that I recommend to you possibly for your businesses or your lives? And there's a bunch of those. Like, there's some things that you'd have to beat me up to get them away from me at this point, because I use them on a daily basis. Like, literally AI, and don't tell my employees this, but AI has quickly become probably my favorite employee at this point. And so, yeah. And speaking of employees, through my company, we've actually just hired another person. So I always love that. It always feels like Christmas when a new person comes in. We've parted with one person and we've added one person and we're adding another person. We've already sort of upped the list. And so we're working on finding that second person right now. So it's exciting times. We're back to finally growing again. If you know me, you know we've been through some pain over the last few years. Everybody kind of got over COVID. We didn't. We got sicker as time went on. And we've fixed all the things. We've built a better business today. I'm really actually proud of what our team have done and what we've survived. And so the future is bright. So enough about me. How about you? So today's guest, I won't say I'm really excited about this one because I always say that, but I am kind of. So a gentleman named Andrew Mills, who's better known as Hamish in the industry, brings more than 30 years of entertainment industry experience. Hamish has toured with acts like U2, Metallica, Nirvana, Rod Stewart, and other high-profile entertainers. And he worked with service providers in the US, Australia, UK, and Europe. And Hamish has been responsible for managing and directing operational functions for large entertainment service providers in multiple countries. A leader with proven success at companies including VER, Tait Towers, Epic Productions, Vari-Lite, and Light and Sound Design. Now the Senior Vice President of Operations for PRG. Hamish has a drive for excellence and success. Please welcome Andrew Hamish Mills to the podcast. Well, hello there, Mr. Mills. How are you?
Very good, Marcel. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm sitting here in sunny South Florida when everybody else is freezing to death. So, although,
Yes.
you know, my friends in Canada love this one, but I went out for my walk this morning and I actually had to put a jacket on. It was like, I think it was 48 degrees or something when I went out for my walk this morning. I walk like 4 miles every morning. And I was like, whoa, this is a little bit chilly at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, it was 41 degrees where I live in Simi in California here right now. I ride my bike every morning. I'll do like 8 or 9 miles on my bicycle.
Good.
Not electric.
Yeah.
And
those are so funny.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what? Those have a purpose. I've got one of my best friends is, he's an older guy. And, he's able to still get on a bike. He's still able to get out and experience things.
Of course, I love that.
For people that aren't as inclined physically, it's a good substitute for that.
I have a house up in Canada in like the Banff area, basically.
Yeah.
And we go there for the whole summer. And so I have 2 e-bikes and I'm buying an e-mountain bike as well.
Yeah.
And so that one kind of surprised me. I was like, okay, what's the purpose of these e-mountain bikes? But so many of my friends up there are like, these crazy like champion mountain bikers and stuff. And the thing is, you can just get further faster, because e-mountain bikes are all, and you know this, I'm sure, but they're all pedal assist. And so you still have to work, it's just...
no, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, you can go faster, you can go steeper, you can go higher, whatever it is, right? Yep. And so they can get in what was a 4-hour ride and you really had to plan for it because you didn't have time. They can get that in 2 hours now. And so that's sort of the protocol. For me, I'm just old and out of shape-ish. And, I want help up the freaking hill. I want somebody to hook a chain up to the front and just pull me up the hill, you know?
Yeah.
So, but the mountain bikes, because of where the e-bikes, I should say, because of where our house is, like you can physically ride your bicycle down into town, which I do. And then you got to ride back up. So if you have a couple beers when you're in town or whatever, it can be a little painful coming back up.
Yeah, it's a struggle.
But if my girlfriend or one of my house guests or something wants to go down for a coffee or a beer or whatever, we'll take the e-bikes and ride down there. And you could just hit the button and ride back up again. These aren't pedal assist. They've got a throttle on them. And so they're fun. I think I've always said those e-bikes that I have are probably like the most fun per dollar that I've ever spent on something because they really are a blast.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can do 30, 40-mile rides and, not break a sweat. So
no, 100%.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Yep.
So I got to ask you because I don't know the answer to this one. Where did you get the name? Where did Hamish come from?
So everyone asked me that question. I've had that nickname since Australia, and it was funny. Like, my career started with, when I was 18, left school. I had my best mate who he set up his own little small business, which is a mobile disco. So he would, he invested in some speakers and bought some lights, and we made in his garage a homemade lighting board, basically, which was a bunch of, household switches with Edison's or, extension cords plugged into the back, and you would just sit there during, whatever he would get a job, whether it was a bar mitzvah, wedding, whatever, and do the lights and stuff for that. And so I started there, and then he was a drummer as well. So then he started doing cover bands. And so I followed along, and my actual first gig, ironically, was audio. I remember we did this rehearsal in this it was like a preschool. One of the band members had a friend that had access to it. And that's where they set up, and I did audio for the first time there. But basically, I got into the cover band circuit in Australia in the late 80s. And the cover band circuit in Australia was actually pretty vibrant back then. And you could go out, and, we still see it today, right? We still see quite a lot of pretty popular Australian cover bands, whether it's the Bee Gees, Pink Floyd, and they definitely still have a vehicle and an audience for those sort of things. But back in the 80s, it was a very vibrant thing where you could go out and tour Australia for 4 or 5 months going around, and you'd go around and do what I call a pub circuit. So it was a good way to see a lot of Australia. You'd play some of these really outback towns where, you have to sweep the blood and the glass up at the end of each night on the loadout to go do that. But anyway, one of the drummers in the bands that I was working for, he couldn't remember my name, and he just looked at me and says, "You look like a Hamish, so I'm just going to call you Hamish." And it sort of stuck because it's a pretty unusual name.
It is.
So it sort of just stuck with me ever since. And I sort of, it sort of followed me because, I did the cover band stuff in Australia. And then I started to do recording bands, and I LD'd Australian band called Spy vs. Spy. And then I ended up doing Susie Quattro.
Wow.
Around Australia. So I did that. And then I did Cliff Richard as a lighting. I was like the youngest kid on thing. I was like 20 at the time. And, I got on this Cliff Richard tour of Australia. Cliff Richard, for the audience who may or may not know, is a pretty renowned performer in the UK, Europe, and Australia. The lighting designer at the time was a guy called Bob Elliott. And we had a pretty complex lighting rig with it. It was all, triangular pods that moved during the show. We had Vari-Lites on it. And that was sort of my intro into what I call a large-scale production tour. Actually, the first one I actually worked on was Bee Gees. I remember loading into the Bruce Indoor Stadium, and I was working as a stagehand, and Mel was the lighting board operator, and I think it was Carl Dodd was the lighting designer. And we did the Bee. That was amazing. That's what sort of got me into real. Hey, this is a career for me. If I really
did the Bee Gees blow up as big in Australia as they did here?
Oh, huge. 100%. Yeah. A huge following. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they sort of lived there, right? Is at one point, I think, between, UK, Australia, and then obviously, settling in the US. But they're very popular there.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the disco thing here just went completely boom, and they were suddenly huge. But I didn't know if they were also big. I would assume they'd be big in Australia as well. But just curious.
Yeah. No,
so
huge.
the name stuck, and it's funny. Like, I mean, at least it's Hamish. It's not like some of the really funny ones that people have walked around with for 50 years.
Yeah.
Poop is always one of my favorites.
Yep.
Nice guy. Well, and I guess his comes from his name at least. But.
Right.
But still, it's a weird name to have to carry around your whole life and get called on radios and stuff. Poop.
Yep. Yeah.
So you kind of started late then by let's call it geezer standards. Where a lot of these guys started in the 70s.
Yeah. I'm a youngin in the things. I mean, I'm 55 now. I mean, I've been doing this 37 years, but I sort of caught the tail end of what I'll call the sweet spot in our industry, where it really changed quite dramatically. I mean, I moved to the UK. It was interesting because when I finished doing Cliff Richard in Australia, the guys who did that were from Samuelson's at the time, which was, a branch of Vari-Lite. Jerry Holt was the crew chief on it. And, they asked, "Hey, Hamish, you want to come over to the UK and do the next Cliff leg in the UK?" And I was sort of like, I'm 20 at the time. And I said, you know what? Australia's only so big. And for me, it was an opportunity. And both my parents are English, so I got a British passport, so I could literally jump on a plane. And
that's handy.
So I had a drum kit at the time. I sold it. That's what was paid for my plane ticket. And the tour was meant to start in, I think, August or September. This is back in 91 or 90. I got it so long. So I decided, I'm going to move over to the UK early. And at the time, they didn't have a gig for me. So I said, you know what, I'm not going to sit around. I'm going to, pound the pavement, see if I can just land another gig with a different company, just see what happens. And I ended up working my first gig was with a company called Supermech.
Yeah.
And Supermech, you
Mr.
know,
Clark.
was Mr.
Yeah.
Clark, Peter Clark. Peter Clark job interview. Do you know what PDs are? No,
Yeah.
you've got the job. Maxie, give that man a tenner. You know,
I loved Peter, man. That guy was. Is he still around? I don't know.
I don't know if he's still alive or what it is.
Yeah, I asked someone else, and they said, I think he's still around, like he's still above ground, which is good. But I haven't heard of or about or from him in 100 years, forever.
Yeah, but I mean, it was interesting because, you know, my first tour in the UK, I landed doing the Gypsy Kings for Clarkie. And it was like, you know, at the time, you know, Clark had a pretty unique formula to how he did lighting, right? It was just like straight box trusses. You would go up to, you had two offices, one in London and one up in Banbury, where you would generally do the preps. And he would just have stock looms and stuff. And it was pretty cookie cutter in how he sort of did it. And he was very, you know, I remember I was on tour with him, and then he said, "Oh, you got a day off? I want you to go do a load-in at Sheffield Arena for the WWE." You know, oh, thanks, Peter. You know,
yeah, nice.
But I ended up doing that, and then it was interesting because the next job I did for him was Nirvana, and that was, you know, God, what was it? The Nevermind tour, whatever it was.
And the first one.
And that was a LSD job. That was completely, they were so busy with what they had, they just outsourced it all to Clarkie.
Wow.
And so they sent the crew chief over, who was Mil Rackey. And Mil, I sort of was on the lighting crew there, and he said, well, Hamish, you need to come over to light and sound design. So I said, okay. So, you know, I finished doing Nirvana, and then I got a job at light and sound design, and I went out and did Black Sabbath was my next tour. And I did that, and that was a, you know, once again, this is a cool learning experience.
No
you know,
kidding.
I'm like 21, I'm starting to do these projects, traveling around Europe. And then I got what was probably my first major tour, which was Metallica, the Black Tour. And
that was a big one, yeah.
Yeah, well, it was like, for me, it was funny. I forgot to bring the T-shirt. It's like, I think I was like number 54 on the crew as that cycled through, you know, on where we were with that. But, you know, that was because, you know, Jake Berry was a production manager. Right? That was my first interaction with Jake. John Broderick was a lighting designer. And, you know, when you work with JB, he's a very articulate guy.
Yes, he
is. His
is.
expectations to, very fanatical about his intercom. Back in those days, what was quite interesting, growing up in Australia and working lighting boards there, we actually were using DMX, you know, pretty early compared to the rest of the world, right?
And him and his analog desks, right?
100%. Well, him and Willie are both like that, right? They are very much into the mindset that the analog 12-volt control is you're getting an instant gratification of the feel of the light through the faders on the board. And they felt the degradation or the signal from DMX was too slow to the response time that they wanted to work with. So they were adamant. I mean, I did Metallica and I had like 672-way dimmer racks in a banana patch bay that was massive to deal with the fact that everything was managed on an analog console.
Yeah. No, I remember that. He actually, I got into, I wouldn't call it an argument because I wouldn't have got into an argument with JB, but I was doing a demo with, I don't remember if I was with Martin at the time or what, but I was at upstaging in a demo. And he got into this conversation with me about, because I was looking at his setup and I was like, why are you using an old Avo analog console? And he said, oh, because it's so much better and there's more feel and it's faster. And I said, why do you need faster? Like, you know, you're changing from scene to scene. And he you know, brings up a look and then he starts going, da-da-da-dun, 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 like he's playing drums for Metallica, right? And I'm like, okay, I get it.
He had that for his strobes, right? He had two buttons on the front of that console, which was exactly that.
Yeah.
Like it was what Metallica song where
he played the strobes.
He's basically playing the strobes. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it was probably like dun 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 dun, whatever that song's called.
Yeah, I got it. So yeah.
Yeah.
That tour for me, by the way, was at the time 21 on the Black Tour.
And that was their breakout tour.
That was their breakout tour.
That was when that album went nuts for them.
Well, you know, it was funny because at the time there was us. We had Guns N' Roses out.
Yeah.
Opie was doing Guns N' Roses. Jake was doing Metallica. And of course, those two are like two pieces apart, right? They're all they're always on the phone trying to outdo each other on how quickly you do the loadout or whatever the things were to go
fun.
do it. You know, Jake would always bust your balls to say, hey, you took long in the loadout. It was only an hour and 50 minutes, but 15 trucks.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was a good cutting experience for me on that tour because I actually was paired with a lot of good people on that tour. A little buddy, Gordo Heinford, you know, Tommy Booth. Yeah, we had a very strong crew. And
at that point, you were just part of the lighting crew, or?
Yeah, I was doing dimmers. Yeah, I was the sort of head dimmer technician. So, you know, and you know, that was a large tour because, I mean, like I said, I walked in, I suddenly got, you know, 672-way dimmer, you know, dimmers to manage. And you learn very quickly all the craft that you need to, and particularly when you start doing different venues and stuff. I think one of the things that I struggle with even to this day is that people have lost the fundamentals with touring these days because it becomes so complacent or just don't understand some of the things that you should be doing. You know, and it first starts with your power. If you're not measuring your power and understanding if you've got good, clean power, you're going to have a bad day.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen on a couple of large jobs where, we've dropped a neutral or the electrician wired the tails in incorrectly. And, you know, it really does start with those basic fundamentals of, you know, going, like you go to a venue for me, you know, how I used to work at Metallica was, and I said this to Jake, I would go to every department, audio, you know, video, myself. I basically took on everyone's tie-ins in the morning because I would used to be able to ask the right questions to the electrician, you know, okay, what are these, what are the feeds on? Are they independent? Are they separate? Is mechanical ground, electrical ground? Is there any AC units on these stuff? You know, you get into all these different things because, you know, if you were tied on the same power as the audio, then you know the audio guys would come at you online because of the buzzing or, you know, all those other things. So, you know, it was in my interest to try and get in front of that as much as possible. So, you know.
Have you seen them recently? Have you been out there recently for Metallica?
I haven't seen Metallica.
The big stadium thing?
No, I haven't. Yeah, interestingly enough, the last Metallica thing was when I was at Tait, when we did the video
the rig that
shoot.
fell over or whatever, the fake crash of one of the towers or something. What was it? Something broke or looked like it broke during the show.
Well,
I remember.
I mean, that was, you know, because when we did I've forgotten, it was
I think it was Load.
Yeah, Load had the collapsing towers. Each one had their theme, right? We had the Justice tour with the large statue.
Yeah.
You would have that tour with the towers collapsing. They had a huge toilet. I mean, the stuff we did at Tait was a culmination of all of those things for these, you know, large movie shoot that they were doing. So, you know, we designed this whole thing when I was at Tait that was, you know, massive in scale to all the different elements of those different tours that they did and combine it into one show. And I can just remember like testing the hydraulic towers out in the car park at Tait on, you know, just the mass that you were moving at such a quick rate.
Yeah.
And stopping on a dime. It was funny. We used to have some, I think it was Nathan Cross, who was the guy who was running Navigator for the programming on that particular thing. We used to, we would test the things. We had a video with like a watermelon, and we'd see how we could crush the watermelon with the towers coming down. And then we had an Adam Davis doll that was plugged in there as well at one point. That was pretty funny.
That's awesome.
But you got to see some pretty cool stuff.
Well, the new one. So I went and I hung out with Koenig up in Canada in Edmonton last summer because I was up there at my house, and I had never seen monitors done under the seats like that. Like the whole monitor setup was under the seats. And so you had follow spots down there, you had monitors, you had Video World down there, and it was all happening under the seats, and the audience had no idea. And I mean, I guess you got to put them somewhere, but I had just never seen monitors done remotely like that. Like I'm old school, where I always saw them done from the side of the stage. Maybe I just didn't pay attention, and we've been like that for a long time,
I mean, most of the stuff, like on the largest stadium tours I did stuff, they were always under the stage, and they had the video. But they had the video cameras, or video monitor screens to look at the artists, and they were just
this wasn't under the stage. This was under the seats, like off the field. Yeah. I mean, next to one of the VOMs, and I mean, it was just like a full-on production center down there. It was wild. I couldn't believe it. But it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, you were just talking about moving these monstrosities and stuff. Like, I know I'm jumping around a bit now, but is there a point where you and others like you start feeling uncomfortable that, like, maybe we've gone a little too far here? Like, maybe this is getting dangerous?
What I say to that is that you've got to have, first of all, confidence in the level of engineering that you feel you have behind it. And it's interesting when we talk about the safety of the industry. Like, I go back to my time at Cliff Richard. I used to walk the truss.
Yeah,
I didn't have any safety harness on or anything. That was the days where you would like camber down the cable pick to get off the truss. You wouldn't even use the truss ladder. You would just slide down the cable pick and get off. I mean, we did some pretty stupid stuff.
Yeah.
Back in the day that was safety related.
Well, and usually half the people doing it were high as a kite as well. Too.
Yeah, totally.
It's not like people were of clear mind when they were sliding down the cable pick.
Yeah, so I mean, from a safety perspective, you started out, if you go back to the infancy of the industry back in the 70s and 80s, where safety wasn't necessarily the forefront of people thinking.
Yeah,
and it has made quite that journey now, with the Event Safety Alliance and all these other things in place. And, we've had some consequential issues or, failures out there. I think Garth Brooks won, Justin Timberlake won, I think it was Justin Timberlake.
Yeah.
Grid failures, Sugarland. There's a lot of things that happen, and it really... And that is a challenge, I think, for anything you're doing today in production, is really understanding what you're doing and having the confidence in the ability of the people behind that to ensure that you don't put yourself into that situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you brought up ESA, because they were actually a sponsor on today's podcast.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
I just did their sponsor read here 20 minutes ago. But I had Digby on the podcast once, and I had no idea. He told me basically where the whole concept of it came from was, his first gig in a club, when, a set piece basically came off the rails literally and crushed a girl and killed her. Mm-hmm. And he was the guy who hit the switch to make the thing move that fell and killed the girl.
Yep.
And I was like, holy shit, that's a story. Like,
it's a heavy burden, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot to deal with. Whether it was,
kidding.
Yeah, no
kidding.
That's the thing for me, right? Is that we talk about life overhead safety, and particularly when you get into some of the complexities of the productions today, because we're always pushing the envelope with it.
Yeah.
If you get into high speed performer flying or just automation in general, there is a lot of risk to that, and it's really making sure that you are, once again, doing your due diligence. So always third party engineering for me. Always try and make sure that you're having those right level of conversations. But unfortunately, quite often these things end up as a failure of just human behavior more than the fact that it wasn't engineered or something. Like, it was engineered, but I didn't follow the engineering directions.
Yeah. Well, and, like you said, I mean, the way it used to be done, everything was a shortcut. Everything was sort of a made-up last-minute idea. Well, we could just do one of these, and strap it to this thing over here, and it won't go anywhere, Yeah. And, I mean, most of the time it worked, most of the time.
Pretty much we got away with it, right? It was just one of those things you were lucky where there wasn't an accident where you were probably doing something that wasn't probably in the best interest or the outcome if it was to be looked at and done the right way. That was back in the days too. That was always part of the thing, is there was a shortcut, to trying to get to what you needed to get done. I mean, it's interesting today. I mean, I was listening to your podcast the other day with Chris, and you talk about the technology reliability now, because back in the day when I toured, it was you had to strive for 100%, everything working. So if I had something, I would actually go up in the truss during the show, and if I had a bulb can, a par bulb out sometimes, I would go up and say, during the show, I'd sit there with a chain bag and a rope and drop it in. Someone load a bulb in, and I'd do it, and I'd put it in and get the rig back up again and get it back to 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just doesn't seem to happen these days. It's like, we'll just don't worry about it.
Well,
if something does go down.
There is the fact that there's like 1,000 moving lights in the rig now, right?
Exactly,
so I'll just cover it with another one. That's okay.
Yeah.
Like, you don't notice them missing. Like, back in the day when there was only 12 of them up there, you did notice one missing.
No, totally.
But, now it's a little bit different. It's, I had that conversation with somebody yesterday, and I don't want to get into any negative stuff, but we were talking about just sort of the lack of sort of art or drama in some of these lighting rigs now, where everything has 1,000 moving lights. It's all a little bit ubiquitous.
Yeah.
Whether it's a country act, a pop act, a rock and roll act, or an opera, they all have 1,000 moving lights and similar looks going on. And, that's what I loved so much about that. And people are ad nauseum on this one right now. But the Mark Brickman thing, Roger Waters, I almost said, Jesus, David Gilmour. Yeah. And, I mean, it was so artistic and so unique and so different. And I just loved it. It was
you're just talking about that tour he just did, right?
Yeah.
Because I think you went to Madison Square Garden.
I did, yeah. I went and saw Wiseman.
I went to the LA show at Into It there, and I took my wife, and show was amazing. I mean, look, as an artist, he was the one, and that was the one disappointment I never got to do was tour with Pink Floyd, because if you go back to the Pulse tour in '94, whatever it was, I was on the tour obviously with Metallica, and then I think I finished that. I went out on Deep Purple or something afterwards. But, I had friends who did that tour, and it was like, from a lighting perspective, that would have been the ultimate, thing, and I still look at that show today, and it still holds its own today.
It's true.
In the creativity and just the
Well, you can't say that about very many shows, can you?
You can't.
What is that, 30 years ago?
Yep.
And it still holds up. Granted,
100%.
You'd have much brighter moving lights today.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have much brighter everything today, and you'd have more video and all that stuff. But that show was incredible, and it still holds up. And I watched some video of it right before I went to New York, just for nostalgic reasons.
Yep.
And, I love anytime a designer, I loved, what was that, the Coldplay video, Speed of Sound, the one with all the Element Labs tubes, the Versa tubes on it.
Yep.
I loved it. That to me was just, I think Keeling did it, if I recall.
Yeah, Keeling, he did that. He did the same thing for Kravitz, right? With the,
exactly.
the circular tubing going around.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And, I love stuff like that. I like when somebody takes a chance and says, I'm not just going to put 1,000 moving lights. I'm going to do something a little bit different. And know.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? It's the artistic level of the people, and we go back to the conversation about, JB and, like Willie Williams on U2. Similar sort of guy, right? Movement of lighting with not actual physical moving lights and stuff. And he was also in that mindset with, hey, I'm still going to have an analog console because there's certain movement I want to see in the fixtures themselves that I'm not necessarily going to get on a moving light console.
Yeah.
From that perspective, and his sort of design methodology was interesting, because when I did the Pop Mart tour, I mean, if you look at that and in the Claw, he took, architectural elements that he saw at LAX and, whatever else, and he sort of incorporated them into his design. But I remember doing the Pop Mart tour, and, that was the real, what I would call the transition on the LED side of the equation, right? So before that, we're all using bloody Jumbotrons and whatever the other things, massive, LED screens that weighed a ton and were very cumbersome. And they came out with the blue LED, and then Frederick and that group basically built this video wall for U2. And, obviously the band funded. It's interesting when you look at the history of some of what bands have funded in the technology of the entertainment industry, with Genesis, U2, Supertramp, used to buy all their stuff as well back in the day.
It's almost like what porn did for, video file compression.
Yeah.
It's true. None of that stuff would have gotten as big and as fast as it did without porn paying for it. It's true. Yeah. Sad, but true. But so how long were you at LSD?
About 8 years. Yeah, 8 years. I did, I lived in the UK when I did U2. I met my wife in the audience, interestingly enough, at Oakland. And, her sister was
American?
an air stewardess. Yeah, she's American. She's born and raised in California. And I was living in the UK. I met her, and anyway, cut a long story short, we got married a year after I met her. And we're still together today. We've been married 26 years, 27 years.
So do you have a 5-year-old kid or something?
I've got a 21-year-old, and I got a 35-year-old, 36-year-old.
I was just making a joke that maybe she got pregnant and you got married.
No, it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
But that was so. I came off U2, and then I moved to the States. And then because Light Sound Design, we had offices in Birmingham and Newbury Park.
Yeah.
Nick and Tim said, "Hey, we'll just sponsor your visa over here. You can just work over in the US until I got my my visa from my marriage or whatever it was, my green card."
Yeah.
And then I did Rod Stewart for Tim, and then interestingly enough, that's when I got an offer to go to Vari-Lite, because when I got married, I want to come off the road. It's the one thing for me, right? Got to have a successful marriage. It's very hard to do that if you're
really
always on the road.
I don't know how some of these guys do it. I have no idea.
It takes a special person. They're willing to stick it out, and they don't see their partners for long periods of time. And that just wasn't for me. And I sort of made that conscious decision that, after whatever it was, 12, 15 years of touring, I was done. And I wanted to sort of have a more grounded, stable, regular life moving forward. So interestingly enough, was Tim Lamb, who was a stage manager on U2, got a job at Vari-Lite, and it was Tim who got me a foot in the door to go work at Vari-Lite in Los Angeles.
Interesting.
So, I then, transitioned over to LA, and then I ran that shop for about 6 years at Vari-Lite. And, we were that was interesting because that was sort of coming up to the tail end, that was early 2000s. So, I finished Q2. Right, it was 99, so I think it was 2000. I think I started at Vari-Lite, and did around 6 years there. And that was funny working in LA, and you do the Bob Barnett shows, and the Grammys, the Oscars,
Dickinson,
Dickinson, and just the craziness of working in the LA market, because it's its own beast.
Yeah.
But people don't understand sometimes what it is in the LA market, but it's very interesting how that functions from that perspective. Because, a lot of the design that happens in the lighting side of things is that they design in what I call situ quite often. It's not like on a prescribed tour or production where you've got a definitive design and it stays pretty regimented from the minute you get it on the plot to the minute you're out field. Because quite often they're out on site and they're making in situ decisions on where they're putting fixtures and doing everything else. So you would always have to put in a ton more cable and additional fixtures, TBD, because it's up to the designers, ideas of where they want to do it once you're out on job site. So, and also very demanding too on when they want to see response times when they need added stuff.
Of course, yeah. It's wild too, like with Vari-Lite. I had Dickinson on the podcast not that long ago, I think maybe 6 months ago or something. And we were talking about the VL5 and just the sheer numbers. And I think he threw a number out and it just blew my mind, like of basically the number of VL5s that he's rented overall, like just a ridiculously huge number.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy, right? It's like when you had Conti on the other week, it was like, because a lot of the fives have obviously converted to LED, but and it's funny when I sort of came into the PRG fold, I sort of walked back in the shop after leaving Vari-Lite and I said, oh, look, there's fixtures I touched 20 years ago, 15 years ago. They're still working.
Yeah, that is wild, isn't it?
It's pretty crazy.
Talk about a successful fixture, though. I mean, you build it, 30 years ago or something, and it's still in use.
Well, I mean, it's got one of those aesthetics that's just not duplicated, right?
No.
It's just the actual physical look of the fixture itself. It was interesting when you had Brickman on the other day, and you think he was calling VL3s, but I think it was 2s and 4s, right? The things. But even for me, the VL2 and the VL4, the light source and what that put out is still a beautiful light source compared to some of the other stuff you have today. It's still,
I agree.
It's it was always the thing with Vari-Lite was the optics to that sort of fixture were second to none. I mean, it was almost too good quite often because you'd see the imperfections come out on the go-boat sometimes when you do it. But
I think the thing that lost me with the 6, or at least when you go back and compare it now to some of the things that are out now, the small aperture isn't as pleasing to me anymore. I love the big aperture lights that are out now.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
and they
that
keep
whole
getting
field
better.
of view. Yeah, they
Yeah.
do. Yeah, yeah.
You know, like
yeah.
that new stuff from Ayrton just blows my mind. That Rivali, and I don't know what the other ones are called. There's a bigger one that just came out, which is oh God, it's a track in South Africa or something. Oh no, that's the Kailami. They obviously everything built around racing and stuff, so I should know it, but I don't.
Yep.
So now you've basically completely transitioned. You're off the road. You're running shops for these big lighting companies.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I came up around around Vari-Lite, or was the shop manager there for 6 years, so it's just putting product out the door. And, I ended up wanting to go into project management, right? Because that's, after touring for so long, there's a lot knowledge base that's so important when you're working with your clients and advancing jobs and doing all the things. Like, I wanted to sort of participate in the beginning stages of developing a project to avoid the heartache you would quite often find yourself in when you go into rehearsals, because people weren't paying attention to the details.
Yeah.
So, when you go into production design, am I in the round? Am I, at the end of the arena? And then getting into the devil in the details, right? How does the show go together? You've got the creative element to the show that the designer wants to meet, but then you've got the practical elements that still have to be met, putting it in and out every day, putting it on a trailer or a truck and moving it, from city to city. And then, depending on your schedule, you're doing back-to-backs. If you design something, it's, you're still putting shit up at, 1 o'clock in the, at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a problem, right? It's like you're burning your crew out. They're not getting any break. And you really got to take into a lot of things into consideration when you're sort of, working on finalizing a design that's taking in all those different elements, right? Is, am I loading in from upstage right, upstage left, upstage center? Am I designing a mother grid that holds a whole arena floor for 2 hours? What are the things, how do you make things so there's flexibility in what you need to do each day, so you can move more quickly depending on the constraints of the building,
really
or whatever it is
practical
you're
stuff.
in. Pretty much. It's that's the biggest for me today. Seeing where we are in the industry and seeing the old guard, your Jakes, your Opies, Bugsies, all the older production managers that have the craft, because what happened to them years ago? They actually spent their journey with the bands expanding at the same rate as the band did, and really understood all the different nuances they needed to be successful,
right?
To where they are today, where I think some of the up-and-coming production managers today are sort of more so thrown into the throes of, I'm doing a club tour or a small, shed tour, and suddenly my artist has gone viral, and now I'm doing arenas.
And that happens so often now,
and
doesn't it?
And
I mean, the whole social media phenomenon. You start out in clubs and you end up in stadiums,
the transition of a lot of these artists happens very quickly. I mean, Lady Gaga would be a good one for me too, right? I mean, I remember when I was at Tait, that she started out as a lower tier, production budget, and then she went through nuclear within 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it was sort of crazy, the level of production she went to.
Some of the country artists now too, like some of these country artists like Jelly Roll, and some of these guys, like they're not overnight successes, because like Jelly Roll's been doing this for a long time, but all of a sudden it just exploded from social media, and suddenly he's doing stadiums. It's these things are crazy.
Yeah,
it's
so
wild.
you get that expansion, and then you have got the capability of making those next tier ups into those different size productions. And I think, for me, that becomes a challenge, is, going back to, is the creative designer element meeting the requirements of the size of the tour and the schedule and all those sort of things. And then have you thought in all the practicalities, and, are you able to drive better conversations to avoid a lot of heartache or potential issues when you do get out into the rehearsal side of things? Because you'll get the designer, same thing, right? Is that their trajectory to, I've gone through school, I've done my stuff, I've learned my stuff on YouTube or whatever it is, and now I'm doing these higher level productions, and I'm sort of designing without any sort of practical knowledge behind it, right? So for me, if I'm working with a designer like, Spike or Justin Colley as an example, those guys did their graft in setting up as lighting technicians first. So they clearly understood the practicalities of quite often what they would design. And they were really great to collaborate with on the vendor side of things, because you could speak at the same level as and sort of work through some real problems to get to the right outcome.
That's such a good point. You know, it's such a good point. I would guess especially some of the younger designers coming up are not as aware of how hard it's going to be to put this thing together every day and take it apart every night. And they just design something pretty, you know?
Yeah, correct. They've just got the end result up there. I mean, you know, if I take my time at Tait as an example, when you're designing at Tait, you've got even more things you're layering, because I've got to look at it from the manufacturing standpoint.
Right.
I've got to look at it from the implementation on show site. How am I looking at the ergonomics? How are stagehands going to unload it? Do all those sort of things. How is it going to package? How's it going to ship? Is it an upper deck, a lower deck of an aircraft? Is it going in Europe box, an American box truck? All these things that you're factoring into a custom design situation that you've got to take into consideration. And, you know, am I doing something that takes the least amount of tools possible and the least amount of human effort to pull it up and pull it down each day? And, you know, that's where what production obviously wants to see with that, because that just...
and there's, you know, I think like back in the day, you know, there were problems where... as we were starting to sort of go from the simple box sort of setup to all of this scenery and these weird shaped things and stuff, you started having things that were designed, shows that were designed not for every venue, but for some venues. And then you get to the first venue and you go, oh shit, it doesn't fit.
Yeah,
what are we gonna do? Like it fits physically in the building, but it doesn't fit in the loading door or something, you know? Like, and
so it's funny because I did it was a Goo Goo Dolls tour, and you know, we had the Maya 10s or whatever, the huge Prism stuff, and it was literally you know, to get them through the door, there was a couple of sheds that we did where it was a real problem, and you'd have to change your load in based on that, right? I have to actually get the speakers in first because there's no path height-wise for them to get round if I put the lighting in first. So you would have to take into those sort of things into consideration when you go into the building. And it goes back to the same thing even back when I toured, right? You still had to have a plan B, A, B, and C, right? What am I downsizing the rig to for this venue? Hey, we're only going to put up the, you know, the front and back truss. We're going to miss the mid truss or, you know, the side trusses or whatever it is. And still be able to do all those sort of things.
So what did you do when you were at Tait?
So interesting enough, you know, when I finished at Vari-Lite, I went over to Ed and Ted's, and I worked there with Donnie Ladico and Ted Fowler. And that was actually one of my favorite parts in my career, because we were a smaller company, boutique. We did a lot of large acts, you know, Eagles, Billy Joel, Elton John. We had some pretty good acts, and we were very good at maintaining that sort of stuff. You know, and when I was working with Spike and Justin, I used to do a lot of collaboration with Tait on the tours that we did. So, you know, I'd be on the phone with Adam Davis or whoever the design team was on integrated. Because that, you know, for me, on the lighting perspective, I always wanted to say, is there an opportunity to have some custom things made that really make the installation out on job site really easy? And I think it was Spike that sort of mentioned Adam, because at the time, Tait's model was changing as well, right? Where they were pretty much an end-to-point sale, where they sort of had to now integrate with the changing model of the clients and saying, hey, I'm not necessarily going to drop a large check for an end-to-point sale to a whole set. I'm interested in partial, but I'll rent the rest. So, you know, they asked me to come in and be the general manager and start running the rental side of that company and sort of building the inventory, setting up the AMS, doing those sort of things. And I ended up doing quite a lot of other things as well. I sort of was pushed wherever they needed me to put out whatever fire was. So it became the, you know, the director for automation there for a while. So I was heavily involved in the nav hoist and the performer flying side of things, and actively participated in
very cool
all of that sort of stuff. So
that was to be fun, different.
It was. Well, it is different because you go from a commodity based sort of situation where, you know, you're designing stuff that's very much you know, already you're working with things that are already been designed and manufactured.
Yeah. You got
right?
four products. How many of each do you want?
Yeah, exactly. So then you get thrown into this environment where everything every day is so different. I mean, it would be amazing what I'd watch going through that place was because, one day you'd be doing Kylie Minogue, which is all these water fountains. You'd have a lift in a swimming pool, and you'd have these water jets that all had to be controlled and automated. And then you'd go do, go back to Justin Timberlake, an 88-foot bridge, laser tracked going down the full length of the arena. And you would just, everything was so different, and it had its own set of challenges and complexities to it. I mean, when you go there, you were in the pressure cooker because you were designing things in a very short time frame and to a very high standard to what you're trying to do. And that's, it was just, one of probably my best experiences just from a learning perspective to walk in and sort of feel and see that, and you get a different understanding of different aspects to the business that you weren't really seeing there before, and you have a greater appreciation from that perspective. So,
that had to be fun. Plus a fun time because it wasn't like it was probably quite corporate by then, but nothing like what it is today, obviously.
I would say obviously I was in the infancy of that, interesting enough. I mean, Michael was obviously still around quite a bit. And Adam and Winky, and, they were in that transition because I think at that point we sold it to Rocket Cargo at the time. That was acquisition by them, which was by another parent VC company. And then, and for me, I ended up leaving because, my family's based here in California. So we decided, my wife decided we actually wanted to move back. So I made the decision that it was, time to move on.
Yeah, it's probably hard for a California person to live over there in Lititz.
I enjoyed my time in Lititz, don't get me wrong. Right? I was on a farm. I was stuck between two Amish farmers. I had this little 8-acre piece of paradise for me. It
Hamish
was great.
The Amish?
Yeah, it was. It's just enough. I used to have a vegetable patch in the back of my property, and I would have the Amish neighbor come over with his mules and his plow as I was coming up, and he would basically plow my garden bed so I could plant my food for the spring and summer. I mean, when you grow your own food, it is night and day difference to what the crap is you get at the supermarket, and it's noticeably different.
I would love to do that. I would love to do that. Yeah, that's one of my dreams is to have one of these sort of regenerative farms, where you grow your own food, and everyone talks about how much better it tastes and how much better it is for you and for the environment and all of that stuff. I try to buy that stuff, like I try to buy from regenerative farms, but it's hard, because there's a lot of people in this country, and if everybody wants grass-fed beef, you're going to have a hard time finding it, right?
Yeah, 100%. So that was cool. It was just a different aspect. We had horses, had 3 horses on there. My wife took care of all that sort of stuff. So it was a different experience. You would get into the chaos of Tait, and like I said, in the pressure cooker, and then you'd step out, and it was just like immediate zoned out. You would just hear the horse-drawn carriages go on the road as you lie in bed at night and stuff. It was different.
Your wife's not in the business, is she?
No.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Those two people in the business family scare me. I don't know how the hell they pull that off.
Yeah. No, my wife said it was a successful real estate broker, and
good.
So
So where'd you go after Tait? I lost my place in your massive resume here.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's sort of it's been quite the journey on the different companies. So I ended up coming back to LA. Yeah, it was a very short period at a company called DPS, and I'm not going to get into the politics of what happened there. But interestingly enough, I ended up getting a job offer to go over to VR, video equipment rentals. Yeah, and I ended up because before I left Tait, I was speaking with Vince and Susan, and they were interested. And finally, the planets aligned. They said, "Well, come on board." And I came over to VR, and I'm sort of put in charge of running the global lighting division at the time. That literally, it's funny when I went into initially interviewed, it was a day that Vincent sold it to their VC, Cameron. So it was the CEO at the time, Steve Hankins' first day.
The same day.
Yeah, first day in there when I walked in there for the interview. And then, it's, that whole thing has been a journey as well, because I literally spent probably a year and a half in the lighting side of things. And then, fortunately, so the industry knows it went nose up, and
Yeah.
I was asked to sort of step in and sort of see the company through bankruptcy, and then through acquisition and merge with PRG. And it was
Yeah.
funny because I had a conversation with Jerry Harris, I think it was in Dallas, and I was saying, well, I was sort of laughing with him and said, my career, I've always stayed one step ahead of everything your acquisition and merge of the companies I used to work at before you bought them, right? So I left Light and Sound Design basically a year before he bought them. I left Vari-Lite a year before he ended up buying Vari-Lite.
Yeah.
And then finally caught up where I was at a company where, I hadn't moved on or had done that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you should probably just plan with him every time you're going to move, just like, hey, I'm thinking of going here. What do you think, Jay?
Yeah.
Tell me what you think. In other words, are you buying it? Because just move me over there instead, it'll be easier. Save a step. But so you were at VER sort of after, because going in there in any kind of an operational role, back, I don't know, call it 10, 15 years ago, would have been really hard because I remember they had no clue. They didn't know how much inventory they had. They didn't know where it was. They didn't know. Their inventory management system seemed to be on napkins or something.
Well, they started out on a program called Rental Point, and then Vince decided to go to a proprietary system, right? So he had his own developed system called Rev, which is VER reversed. So
how ingenious.
Yes. So, and I think at some point he thought that was an opportunity to market it on as just an AMS for general public consumption and so on. And, for me, it was interesting, right? Because my whole career was based around production-based businesses to where I was at leading up to VR. VR was really my first experience walking into a sort of a hybrid, what it becomes a hybrid of dry hire and production business.
Yeah.
And those have very different operational implications as to how you have to service it. I mean, the first thing I sort of had to get my head around when I first joined VR was just the volume of stuff that they would move around the network on a daily basis. Because, there was really, everything was sort of, the salesman was effectively, the rental agent was effectively the logistics manager, the AMS manager, everything in one position, scheduling the gear in the AMS to move around to sell these jobs. So you were seeing high volumes of equipment transferring from one branch to another to meet demand. And, the dry business has a different expectation, obviously, to production. It's very short term. It's very last minute. You can have an order drop in at, 3:00 in the afternoon for a 5:00 delivery sort of approach. So you have a different requirement on how you look at your equipment from a rent ready status and how you have to service that. So operationally, there's some real challenges to mixing both and not degrading one for the other. And how do you successfully still manage those types of situations? And, it's the same thing, we talk about CapEx, and I've, this is a conversation that comes up because, and it's interesting, I've heard some of the other podcasts, and it's quite true, right? Is the trouble that you have with CapEx is that it's what we have to spend today to be relevant is astronomically expensive.
It's crazy. Yeah.
You
Insane.
don't generally get the return on investment you would like to see for the investment that you're putting in. Because, it's interesting. It's funny how the market has sort of allowed itself to sort of dictate, well, I'm only going to pay this, but you're not actually going to get the return on your investment because I'm sort of trying to set the market price for it. And it's like, it's like go back a few years, at one point, Vince made the decision, I'm going to corner the market with WinVision products, right? And he actually did. He got it in such volume and mass, and you had a long return on that investment. It was 5, 6, 7 years, right? Is of continual rental, and I think
even though everyone figured out where he was buying it, and what it was, and could buy it direct and everything else, he did pretty well with it.
No, he did. That was one of his things. And you look at any entrepreneurial owner, they'll just like Rusty at Vari-Lite. Am I in an opportune window point in history where I can sort of, take a large market share with either, designing, manufacturing my own stuff, or am I going to invest in a product where I can corner that market and hold it for a period of time? And it's getting harder and harder to do that today just because of the life cycle of how quick the technology changes. I mean, for you, right, GearSource, for me in an asset mindset, you already have to know what you're doing with the asset before you even take it in the doors. How am I getting rid of it? What's the life cycle or the opportunity for the secondhand or the used asset sale?
Yep.
Because you've got those curves on just like a car, is that you've got that window of opportunity where you're going to get the biggest amount of return off that used asset sale, and when is it time to sort of cash it out? And have a real sort of strategy to that. You've already defined before you've even ingested something. Am I disposing of it? Am I selling it? At what point in its life am I doing it?
The most successful model I ever saw, and I hate to give him credit, but is Bob Cannon, Mike Cannon, the old Bash model years and years ago, where basically no matter what it was for sale in 2 years.
Yeah.
And that included the hottest lights of the time, like I remember, because I worked for High End at the time, and they were selling cyber lights used, and they'd beat us on deals, like where, and because they were selling them at dealer cost, but they were selling them to end users at dealer cost used, right?
Yep.
And so we would lose a deal for 100 cyber lights, and I'd call up Canon and say, "What the hell are you doing?" And he'd be like, "You know what? You guys will get an order from us. Don't worry." Because what they would do is, as they were selling them, they were buying new ones at dealer cost. But at least, their model was just incredible to me. It was just an incredible. And by the way, Mike Cannon does it the same way today. It's just the numbers are way shittier today than they used to be.
Yeah, 100%.
So, because
I've got a bit of admiration for that, because that's truly it, right? You're leveraging the idea on buying in bulk at a lower price, have the idea that it's always available to sell, and know that I can replenish that with a new inventory. It keeps my inventory new, fresh, and I'm still getting a profit on the used asset sale at the same time.
You're minimalizing your utilization cost, basically, because if you look at it and say, I'm going to use it for 2 years, what's that going to cost me? And all you're doing is making that number smaller, and therefore hopefully making it more profitable.
Yep.
But it's the same thing. Like I've had this conversation with Jerry, and I'm not trying to do a sales pitch here, but I've had this conversation with Jerry where it's like, Jerry, why don't you look at your CapEx, carve out 10%, 20% of your CapEx for used gear instead of new? And, I understand the leverage he's using at the bank and all of the different things he's doing, and you can't do some of that magic on used gear. I get it. It's already been depreciated, et cetera, et cetera. But if you can, instead of paying $10,000 for a brand new light fixture, if you can pay $7,000 or $6,000 and get a used one and rent it for a year for the same rental rates you would have rented a new one, and then sell it for somewhere around 80 to 100% of what you paid for it, doesn't that make a little bit of sense somewhere in that math somewhere? And generally the answer is, if you're, call it a small to mid-size rental company, and let's say under, $25 million a year or something, it makes a hell of a lot of sense. But if you're one of these big companies using, either private equity or public money or whatever it is, it doesn't make sense, maybe. It doesn't make as much sense anyways. Yeah. And it's because of how leverage works.
Yeah.
So,
100%.
yeah.
Yeah. The scale is pretty, we do. I think Conti said we did like 241 shows a day or whatever it was.
That
right?
blew my mind.
Yeah,
that blew my mind.
I'm doing a week. I can move anywhere between 500,000 to 1.2 million scans in a week, and anywhere from 500 to 1,400 orders in a week.
That is insane. That is just wild to me. Those are crazy numbers.
Yeah,
in our industry, which is a small industry if you think of it, compared to others, it's pretty small. But that just blows my mind. The other stat was, what did he say? 100,000 moving lights. You guys have over 100,000 moving lights, I think he said.
Yeah.
Just wild, crazy stuff.
It's 30 plus years of acquisition and merging. It's a large inventory base. To manage to. So, and it's, that's the usual challenge, right? Is it always, am I in possession of the right type of asset at the right time? And
so true.
It's what most companies always struggle with, because you never get the dates for where you want to optimize what you have. There's always crossover where, I've got a sub-rent, or, I've got to go put my hand in my pocket and buy more.
Yeah, I know. It's a crazy balancing act, and it's not, the numbers just have gotten so much crazier. And the simple math is, like, a CyberLight used to cost you, call it $5,000, and you rented it out for $300 a week. and you sold it 2 or 3 years later for very close to $5,000.
Yep.
Now that same Cyberlite, which is a Mac whatever, an Ayrton whatever, a Vari-Lite whatever, is $10,000. You're renting it for $175 a week or $150 or $200 a week, and the value's dropping more quickly generally.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And all the math is kind of screwing you.
Yeah,
no matter
it is.
how you look at it.
It is. I mean, look, we've been in a very tough year, and I know that too, right? It's been a race to the bottom, I think, for most vendors on just trying to secure the work. And, we're all obviously hoping for a prosperous 2025. But, I think, it's more indicative for me of, because when we talk about assets, you always got the cost of the asset itself, but then you've got all the other peripheral stuff that supports it around it and what it takes operationally to support it, what you're doing in parts and everything else. And sometimes that gets missed as to what the real cost is of what you're doing to get it out to market and making sure that you're making the margin of revenue to cover your cost of what's really going on.
So
and
true.
That's the one thing for me, it's funny because we get into VCPE, I go with the saying, right? EBITDA is an opinion, cash is fact, right? So
true. Yeah.
It's net free cash flow is generally what is driving your decisions on how you're going to look at your CapEx and what you need to do. But I think for us as an industry, we've done a poor job of educating our clients and sometimes ourselves on what things truly cost. And, how do you imparcel that on to make sure that people are willing to pay for it? Well, and that you're getting your costs covered so you're a profitable business.
Yeah. So I'm not going to mention any names or anything, but I recently was made aware of, call it a letter that went out from a certain company CEO in our industry to their staff, and they've lost money. And generally they're in a really bad place right now. It could be bankruptcy, could be a lot of things, but and they lost money. And so he comes out and says, basically, everything's okay, puff of smoke, everything's okay. Actually, if you look at it, we've grown this year. Our revenue is higher this year than it was last year. Yeah, but your profits have tanked. It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. At the end of the day, that's what matters, right? Yeah. And so I just this is the wrong mentality. I'd rather say, hey, you know what? Our top line sales are down, but you guys killed it this year. And we actually made more money than we did last year. That's amazing. That's obviously a win-win for everything because smaller revenue means less inventory and less people and less buildings and all the hard costs.
Yeah, less cost,
Yeah, less cost.
Well, I mean, I think when you're in a VC or P environment, you're always on this perpetual mill of always having to exceed the next quarter or, infinite revenue growth continuously. And at some point you hit a threshold where that's just not sustainable or, you've exhausted where you're going to get out of the market to go do that. So, for me, it's about, how do you improve the quality, the balance, and to your point, going back to margin and, am I making money? That to me is that's as long as you're covering your costs of what you're doing and making a profit on the top of it. And that's a fundamental, out of all the metrics and KPIs that get thrown out to businesses that we're all asked to look at, the very most fundamental one, do I have money in the bank or not? I have cash is really the one that is the ultimate key.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, take it away and see what you do. I mean, maybe venture capital would invest in you or whatever, because venture capital loves to spend money on things that don't make money, but eventually they're expecting it to make money, just not today necessarily, right?
And it's interesting, right? Because, I think also, I was listening on one of the radio shows the other day and they were talking about, the PE VC sort of model of, it used to be 5 to 7 years. Then it went down to 3 to 5 years on, what I'm investing in and when am I selling it off to the next investor.
Yeah.
And I think what's happened now is that 3 to 5 model is they're still holding companies well past that into the 7, 8, 9 year range.
Yeah.
Probably on, some of the other companies that's going in there. And it's so what's going to happen?
Yeah, I don't know.
At the end of that,
I don't know what's going to happen with the big one out there right now that's for sale and constantly in rumors of who's going to buy it and how they're going to buy it. So, I mean, to me, it's it's wacky math. It's all crazy math at this point that we're dealing with. And I think at the end of the day, a successful company is one that buys gear, has a great plan for, like you said, disposal of that gear, and also how to make money and how much money I need to make, and you know, a willingness to say no. Like as a business owner, one of the most difficult things to do is not to say yes, but to say no. Sure. And in this industry, especially, like when somebody's going, here you go. Like, I don't know if you were at VER, but I heard one of the things that really hurt VER was the, what was the moving light that you bought like thousands of for Bruno Mars?
Oh, God.
It was an LED fixture. I forget what it was, but it was thousands of them. And I heard that Bruno Mars deal was one of the ones that kind of broke the camel's back. And it was just, you know, it was just so asset heavy and price low.
Well, it goes back to the same thing, right? If I'm outspending my EBITDA contribution to the cost of the CapEx, then it's not going to end well.
Yeah.
Right? There's some basic principles that need to be followed when you're sort of looking at how you're spending your cash and what you're going to commit to from that perspective, you know?
Yeah.
So that's always the challenge for, you know, when you're working with clients and saying, you know, can you always look for the upsell on trying to work with stuff that you have today versus going out and buying new? And, you know, some of the pressures on the designer side of things has changed now, where they are more open to doing that because they are constrained by the books of their...
COVID kind of fixed a little bit of that stuff, especially initially. Like initially, it seemed like you guys could all get away with kind of renting whatever was in your shop, you know, because they were just so desperate to put something out the door, right? But then it seemed like everybody got a little spoiled again and said, no, it has to be Model 3. I won't take the Model 2.5. It's got to be Model 3, you know, or else I'll take my show to Christy Lights or somebody else, right? Yep. And that stuff to me is what's got to really come to an end. And I know that, you know, the manufacturers who are all friends of mine don't like when I say that, but I think it's true. Like you can't just keep shoving new fixtures up everybody's asses.
100%. Yeah. I think Steve Richards brought that out in one of his comments back in the pandemic saying, it might have been actually VR bankruptcy, going back to the idea of you keep forcing out new product at such a quick rate that the people that are actually having to front the cash to do it and just not getting the returns. And you're sort of biting the hand that feeds you at some point.
It's tough. It's hard because you have so many companies out there now, like whether it's audio, like let's pick on audio for a bit. You know, everyone, like I talked about this, I don't know, last week, a couple weeks ago with someone about these line array systems where, you know, they're $2.5 million to buy a line array system. And you know, you go from the Model J to the Model K to the Model L, and it's coming very quickly. And if you want the Academy Awards this year, you better have the Model L or whatever. I'm making things up now, but you know what I mean? Like, and then they're stuffing the L series up your ass, and you go to sell the K that you just finished paying for, and you find out it's only selling for $600,000 or $700,000 now, and you're like, holy shit, you know, that was expensive. So. And video's the same thing now. I mean, like these tiles that you guys used to rent for $400 or $500 are $40 now, and you know what I'm talking about, obviously.
No, I mean, it's
way too well.
100%. Yeah, I mean, look, LEDs are a real painful one, and particularly too because you've got, you know, they've gone to such a high definition pixel now that, you know, and particularly on the practical implications of that from a day-to-day management of loading it in, loading it out. The higher the pixel pitch, the harder it is to ensure the integrity of it, because your cost to maintain and keep that product up or through the roof, because it's really something that's more purposely designed for what I call a permanent installation. So I'm going to sort of still define this because I want that level of definition on my corporate or whatever it is. And, you know, on the vendor side of things, you end up having to carry the stick on, you know, just how hard it is to keep that packaged in rentable order. Because of how fragile it is.
Well, and the crazy thing is, like, the reality of all this, and I'm not arguing with designers who know way more than me, but from what I know, the audience member in the front row isn't going to know the difference between 1.9 mil and 3.9 mil.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right? Yeah.
Which might be $2 million in cost. You know. So
well, and that goes back to just the capex conversation again, right? So if you look at it's pertinent to different business markets, right? So, you know, what is a requirement in the music market because the designers want that high-end fixture, that $10,000-12,000 fixture, versus I can go into a corporate or a dry hire environment in hotel and staging where I only need a $6,000 fixture. It does the same thing because they don't care. They don't need, well, I need this last thing. I just need to know it puts light on the stage or the set or whatever it is. And I really don't need that. And that's where the challenge becomes when you're looking at CapEx expense, particularly on a company that's multifaceted and the different businesses.
The ultimate, and I'm careful to say this, but the probably the most profitable time was when the designer worked for the lighting shop.
Yeah.
Because then they just looked around and went, okay, I got 4 of those. I got 12 of those over there. I got 100 of those over there. And they put a rig together, you know?
Well, I mean, look, if you get the opportunity to go back to the upsell, right, it's the first thing you would, as a salesperson, you want to try and do, right, is that, look, if I've got product on the shelf that I can put to you at a lower cost or do it without the additional need, you'll get the benefit of that. And I get the benefit of
Makes
it.
sense.
So to go do that, and that's, I like those sort of conversations when you do get into it, because that's what obviously is optimal for both parties in that perspective.
I'm sure most people are like that still, right?
Yeah,
hopefully.
I think most, it's sort of really up to the tenacity of the salesperson, obviously, and then obviously they're also on the client side, right? Are they just going to stick their feet in the ground and say, it absolutely has to be this? And it's through nothing more than, I just saw it on YouTube, that's the latest thing I've got to have, versus is there a real requirement for it in the design that this fixture or this technology can only meet? And it's sort of understanding that.
It's interesting because I think, when you see that an artist is growing as fast as these artists are growing and they're going from clubs to stadiums, and then you see, a PRG or a Christie or a Four Wall or whoever is growing and they're now, hundreds of $1 million companies. And then the manufacturers are growing. And I remember when I was at Martin, we were like, I remember when it became a $100 million company, and that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And, now that's a relatively small moving light manufacturer these days, $100 million.
Yeah.
But, I mean, at the end of the day, I just don't know if there's room for, 10, like $200 or $300 million moving light manufacturers. I don't know if the market is big enough.
I don't think it is.
To keep supporting it.
I think that's always been part of the problem, right? It goes back to, I always bring this up too, right? Is the level of R&D that goes into these fixtures is
huge.
Really, well, it's a huge cost, but when you look at it relative to what I'll call general consumer products, like whether it's a flat screen LED or a washing machine, whatever it is going to billions of people, then they're going to have a lot more capital up front to really sort of invest in a more robust product, where in our industry, the market is only as big as what it can be.
Correct.
And you're only going to put your R&D level to what you willing to burden on that cost before you have to get it to market to make that profit.
Well, and, runaway success, something like a Sharpie or a Mac 1 or something like that you might sell 100,000 if you're really, really lucky, Well, that's not a lot.
No,
at the end of the day, that's not a lot.
Yeah.
And how many of those are you going to have? Like, not every fixture is going to sell 100,000 units or whatever. So anyways.
Yeah, I always find it interesting in our industry because we always think, we've got this huge market. Like motors is a good example, right? The entertainment portion to motors is infinitely so small compared to who buys the rest of these things in the manufacturing base. It's
so
crazy.
True. So true. Yeah. Well, Philips used to always tell me about lamps whenever, like when I was at Martin and I'd try and beat up Philips for better deals on MSR 1200s or MSR 575s back then. They'd be like, Marcel, you have no idea how little you are, do you? Like, compared to, the medical and all of these other industries that use these lamps, you're nobody. Like, you guys are tiny. So, we were talking about something before we started recording about, you were talking about just how challenging it was coming out of the pandemic and trying to operate a remote business.
Mm-hmm.
And I obviously have a different viewpoint of that because I operate a remote business and have for about 10 years now, I think, like way before it was ever cool. And so, what, tell me about that. Tell me about it. Like, what was the challenge? And
well, I think for what we do, and, I think there's certain positions in any company which could be easily defined as a remote work position, right? Is that if I'm in a virtual thing, I'm just moving numbers around on a screen or whatever it is, then then that works out great. But for me, in quite often what we do, having an in-person interaction where you'll get so much more solved more quickly because I have a direct verbal conversation. Because part of my trouble with electronic communication, and sometimes even in meetings, right? You'll get in meetings and quite often people are on the screen and they look at it, but they've got their other screen and they're off on the side doing it. They're really paying attention to what's been going on in the meeting itself.
Yeah.
To start with, and then and then you get into the other side of things, where if it's email communication or text communication, no one has a visible reference to the tone of that, and people's psychology is, oh, is this guy shouting at me, or this person shouting at me, or or they're not being,
or is the
more
caps
committed.
lock on by accident?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So you don't have a what I call a personal point of reference in that sort of tone, and people quite often will blow it up. And then you got the issues with email etiquette, and are you putting the most pertinent information at the top of the email? Do people write War and Peace novels, or do people? I always write email in bullet points. I try and keep it short, to the point as possible.
That's smart.
Don't try and get into long-winded things, because email for me is a horrible communication book, because you just get overwhelmed with it.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll do 500-600 emails a day in my inbox. It's nuts, because everyone wants to CC, BCC, put you, cover. It's really
cover your ass. It should all just be called
mentality.
CYA.
Yeah, correct. It's all that sort of mindset, right? Well, I sent the email, I'm sort of absconded on responsibility.
Yeah. It's off my desk and onto someone else's.
And I always tell any of my management team of things, it's like, if it's important to pick up the phone, have a conversation, get verbal conversation on something to go do that. But, if you're in a collaborative environment and you need to get more intimate, you're working on a very tight timeline, I need to get real answers to things, and I should be able to go straight over to my asset manager and say, hey, what's the availability of this, or what's my options here, very quickly. And, if they're working, remotely, or they're not accessible, you're just sending an email, but I'll get a response for 2 or 3 hours, depending on what they're working on.
I mean, I can tell you it does get better than that. So, the flip side of what you're saying, like, I actually, a lot of times, almost all the time, I prefer a call like this. Yeah. And so we use a software platform called Roam, and it's very different than anything else out there. It's like an in-person office, but it's virtual. And so I can look at people's offices, and I can see Hamish is in his office and there's nobody in there with him, and I can knock on your door. Right. And you can either say, fuck off, leave me alone, or you can say, come on in. And if I come in, we're just talking. There's no video, but we can put up a whiteboard. We can share a screen. We can do whatever. Or we could say, hey, let's pop into conference 1 over here. And then you've got video and stuff too, right?
Yeah.
But it's much more real time, like what you're talking about, where you can just pop into your asset manager and say, hey, do we have these? Can we get these? Blah, blah, blah. And just have an impromptu water cooler conversation as opposed to setting a Zoom meeting for 3:00 this afternoon or whatever. Let me look at your calendar. No, you're in your office. I see you're there. Boom, I'm coming in, Yeah. So that works really well. And I like it because, like, our system has a built-in AI note taker, for example. Mm-hmm. So I don't have to worry about sitting writing notes during a call. It's all being done for me. Yeah. And it sends me a message with all the notes after. And so there are good ways. But I mean, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. Like, there are, I think, in a company like PRG, I would say there are jobs that probably would be no different virtually than they are in person. Obviously, some of the accounting roles and things like that. But even then, if it's team-based, then the whole team kind of has to be virtual. Otherwise, you're going to have some people who are a little annoyed because they have to go to the office and other ones don't, and things like that.
Yes.
If you can just say the whole accounting team is remote, then it's good, right? But here's the challenge. Like when you said sometimes it takes 2 hours to get an email returned or whatever. So virtual, and I've had employees that, some of whom some of you don't, but who have figured out a way to leave their office on so it looks like they're in their office. But they're out, like, walking their dog or playing with their kids, or they've gone to pick up for school or drop off for school or gone to lunch or something, right? But it shows them in their office. So I'm knocking the shit out of their door and nobody's answering the door. Right. And I end up calling their cell phone and they're like, oh yeah, I just had to run out for a minute, And so there is stuff like that. Like,
100%. Yeah, there's ways to game things for sure, people sometimes.
Well,
take
I
the
mean,
piss doing that. Yeah.
yeah, you know, my girlfriend and I both have worked remote for years, and so she knows when I'm working, I'm working. Like, she's not going to come to me and say, "Hey, you want to go for a walk, or you want to go to the gym, or you want to whatever." Like, there's times of the day when we'll schedule for that kind of stuff, but usually, you know, it's a little bit more structured. Like, I'm in my office, period. Even though I happen to be in my pajamas in the living room, I'm in my office, you know? So, yeah. Uh-oh. Big important email came in. A quote. It's the Beatles reunion.
Hallelujah.
The Beatles reunion. They're putting the band back together.
Yeah.
So, Michael Jackson, you did one of the Michael Jackson tours, right? One of the late ones.
I did, well, when I did the tour, I was, I was at AVL Sound Design, and I was asked to bring in 2 trailers of additional TV lighting for the HBO video shoot in Romania and then at Wembley Stadium. So, you know, I was in between tours at the time, so I said, sure. I went and did that. Benny Collins was the production manager. I think Anthony was the stage manager at the time. Mel was the bulldozer. Who was doing moving lights? I think it was, I think Bosby, I think it was. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But that was an interesting one because, you know, I remember loading the trucks at Birmingham. You know, they flew us Air Romania. And literally, and it was funny, I was on the same flight as Peter Morse, right? So,
really?
So you get down to Heathrow and I get on this bloody plane, right? And this plane was like a miracle on wheels. I kid you not, right? I sort of looked out the window before we boarded and I said, is that retreads on the tires?
Oh, Jesus.
And we sort of get into the plane. It used to be what I think was a troop carrier or whatever it was, because they had the camouflage green food trays and stuff. And literally I went to recline my seat and my seat fell back into the
my
behind my lap. So
that's hilarious.
That was how we started it, right? So So we, anyway, we, fly into Romania, into Bucharest, and, I get a hotel, and then we go to this stadium, and, at the time, this was when Ceausescu had just been outed and, basically killed by the public, right? It's interesting when you go there because it's literally like a movie set. So you go to his palace, and while I was there, I actually got into his palace. There was, I think it was guarded by the UN, and I got a carton. And back in those days, Marlboro cigarettes were a great currency if you wanted to, get your way around.
Make friends,
yeah. So I got a carton of Marlboros and gave them off to this guy, and he let me in, and I sort of walked around this palace. He just saw the amount of money this guy squandered, from his population. And at that point, they were still bringing his coffin out every Thursday so they could spit on it. It was like crazy, right?
Christ.
You would see that, and it was things to go do that. But, I remember, going into the stadium there, and we set up all the lights and stuff, and it was interesting because it was, I remember one night, because we were there for, I think, 5 or 6 days, whatever it was. I can't remember what the period of time was, but I was there for a while. And a couple of nights we sort of got invited. Oh, you should come out to this place. So I said, okay. So we're out with these guys, and we're like the secret police of Romania. And I thought, when we're going out to this, out in the middle of nowhere, and I thought, geez, are we going to end up in a shallow grave here? I was really concerned about it, but I was interested. They took us to this out of this way nightclub thing, and we had a good time there, I guess. But did that whole thing there, and then when the show finished. It's funny. All the HBO guys wanted to get out of there as quick as possible because the country, the amenities weren't the best, and it was just a bit of a shit show. So they all piled into the airport. My flight to go back to London, somehow they managed to bribe the people at the counter there with cash to sell out our seats off, and I'm sort of stuck there now for 3 days.
They sold your seats.
They sold my
seats. Sorry, you can't go.
I literally had no hotel. I just spent the last of my currency because, it was up to my last day. I thought I'd go do it. And I said, oh shit. So, I ended up calling the steel guys because the steel guys are always the last people there pulling down all the steels at the stage. And I said, you got somewhere I can bed down for a couple of days until I can get a flight out. Yeah. And that's what I did, right? I walked into this hotel and it was like, the hotel room with the Steelers, it was just absolutely terrible, right? You'd pull a bed from the wall and the cockroach would pull it back. And, the shower, I didn't have a head on it, so I ended up having to put a water bottle and punch holes in it and put it up there to go do it. But,
we're living large, honey.
We're living large. But that was an interesting experience just to, see that sort of level of things. Another interesting one for me was on U2 when we did Sarajevo. And I remember we landed into Sarajevo, and our hotel, I literally saw the hotel opposite where we were had huge holes in it, right? And I remember watching on CNN this hotel getting shelled live, from a hotel room, wherever it was.
What?
Things, yeah, it was crazy, right? So I get into my hotel room, and above my bedboard is bullet holes. There was machine gun holes and things to go do it. So it was sort of really bizarre.
It's a bit unsettling.
Well, this was just after obviously Bosnia and everything settled down, and but interestingly enough, where we did the gig at the stadium was where Torval and Dean did their Winter Olympics side of things. We had catering in one of the buildings there, which unfortunately was where they massacred a bunch of people, which was really weird.
Scary.
But once again, it's an experience you'll never forget on certain things, right? What you'll visually see and understood what happened there from whatever was going on in the country. It was quite interesting.
I remember going to see Michael Jackson. I think it was the opening show of the tour that was probably either right before or right after that. No, I think it was right after that, because the tour ended when he was going to court about that boy.
Yeah.
But I think Obies did that one. And, I went over because I had a bunch of lights on it just in support of, and plus I wanted to see Michael Jackson. And I brought Tim Brennan with me, which was a funny story by itself, because we were flying out of Miami on Martin Air, and I had no idea who Martin Air was, but it was just the cheapest business class tickets I guess my office could find. And so we were flying through Amsterdam, and Tim, being the big pothead that he is, he's like, "We're stopping in Amsterdam, right?" And I said, "Just to get on another plane." And he goes, "Are you kidding me?" Like the entire flight, I usually sleep on the flight over to Europe from the U.S.
Yeah.
The entire flight, every 30 seconds probably, he was like, "Man, Marcel, I can't believe you're taking me to Amsterdam and I don't get to see a cafe."
Yeah.
And just complaining the whole time. So we get off the plane in Amsterdam. We're walking to the next gate. Our bags are on the plane getting checked to the next gate or whatever. And he's just bitching in my ear because now he's had a few cocktails too. He hasn't slept all night because he's pissed off. Finally, I said, "Fuck it." We walked out of the airport, grabbed a taxi. I had no idea how we were going to get to Prague after this, right?
Yep.
But all I knew is I couldn't listen to Tim anymore. And so we went to like Bulldog or Bullfrog Cafe or whatever it's called. He bought 3 different kinds of weed, got stoned out of his brains, and we grabbed a taxi back to the airport, got our way back onto another flight to Prague, and somehow found our bags when we got to Prague and made it. So It was an interesting experience, but that show was incredible. And so Peter had invited us backstage to meet Michael.
Yep.
And we had laminates, and we're like, Wayne's World, walking through the audience like this. "We got laminates, let us through." So we get backstage and we meet the pop star, and we're going to try to get back out to front of house. And we're doing the same thing, holding up our laminates. Well, now they've let in the whole crowd, and there's like 100,000 people or something. And they were angry. Like they had been waiting a long time, and, they fought to get to this position. We're going against the crowd, and they're like not very happy that we're trying to get through them, right?
Yep.
And so him and I are holding hands like little girls. And at some point, it was like a movie where it was like, our hands came undone, and I never saw him again until the next day at the airport.
Oh, well.
I was afraid that he died.
Yeah,
I literally was
trampled.
afraid he died and got trampled, and I was going to have to explain to his family that I lost their son, or whatever. But
that's interesting, because you'll see that when you open the doors in the stadiums, whether it was Wembley or Bucharest, there, same thing, right? They literally sprint as fast as they can to get to as close to the stage as possible.
Well, and try going against that.
Yeah, well, exactly.
It's like, holy shit.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was wild.
Yeah.
So there was, Sarah told me that you told her about another U2 lemon in Oslo. What's that about?
That's a legend one. So, so obviously, Willie designed this lemon on the stick that sort of drove out from the main stage down a curved track to the B stage, right? And, this thing opened up, and inside we had lights, and the band would sort of step out and walk down the ladder and start into their set for the second part of the show. Well, we're in Oslo, and, I'm sitting on headsets backstage listening to all this because, we're all mic'd up on and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And the music's going, and you see this lemon slowly track out, gets all the way to the end, and then you see the lemon start to open, and then it gets stuck. It's a typical Spinal Tap moment, right?
That's
it's literally
hilarious.
cracked open, right? Music's going, nothing's happening, and I'm listening to the conversation on headset, right? They're all freaking out.
Yeah.
How do we get the band out? They're stuck. We can't do this. And I was in stitches.
Yeah, he's got a lemon peeler.
I saw the humor in it, right?
Yeah.
And then you see this thing slowly go back again, knowing that they couldn't come
It
out.
had to go back again.
It had to go all the way back to its home position before it could get the band out.
Yeah.
And then the band had to walk down to the
Really?
B stage, to do the
no.
set. But it was like just one of those things, and it obviously made the papers and stuff. I know Willie was beside himself. He's like, it's one of the worst things you can have, right? Is something like that happens. I had another thing on Kiss years ago.
Someone talked someone into that too, by the way, right? Like someone said, no, it's a really good idea. We're going to have them come out of this lemon, and it's a really good idea. And that someone is sitting there like this right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was just going to say on Kiss, I had the same issue, similar to the issue in Australia, right? We had, because in G7s we would go out on these, Grove lifts, right?
Yeah.
They were just snorkels that would go out over the audience to do things.
Yeah.
Same thing. That thing broke down, and he stuck out over the audience for like 2 songs until I could get the thing up and going. Yeah.
God of Thunder is when he always did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was one of those another classic, Spinal Tap moments again.
Wasn't there one with, and I don't know if you were involved. I think probably Wiseman was involved because he did a bunch of the Motley Crue stuff. But wasn't there a Motley Crue show when they were doing the track out into the audience with the drum kit?
Yeah, that was a rotating thing.
And he got stuck upside down on it. Tommy Lee got stuck upside down on the roller coaster. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the risk, right? There we talk about technology and those sort of things,
work
right?
sometimes.
And then you got to have a rescue plan. That was the thing. Like when I do performer flying, that was a prerequisite, was that you had to have a defined rescue plan if something failed as to how you're going to get the artist down or whatever it is, and you'd have to have it written out, practiced, worked through. So to go do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anything we missed? I don't know. Like we've covered a bunch.
Well, we sort of shot the shit and talked to quite a few things.
Yeah. No, it was fun. I'd love to do this again. I didn't know you were so interesting. Wiseman said he'll be great, and I said awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know why I don't know you, but there's just because I never toured. I don't know everyone on the touring side of this business. Unless you were in purchasing, because I always sold moving lights, So
yeah, well, my time at Ed and Ted's and Vari-Lite and things, I'd still be quite heavily involved in that side as well. I mean, I used to work, all the time with Martin on those sort of things, and back in the day it was Hairspray with Vari-Lite when he was selling out of there. Ray, it's God, who's the other guy that sort of did the rounds? Peter something. He must have sold at every company as well at some point. But
you're talking about Ed and Heads?
Yeah. Well,
when you mean Epic?
Well, interestingly on that side of it, I left when Ed and Ted's got bought, and we did. I was only there for another 6 months before I moved over to Tait. And for me,
okay.
Well, for me, it was just like one of those things that sort of wasn't going the way I would hoped it was going to go. So very quickly, it was, not going to come out the way I would have hoped. So, and I took that opportunity, and it was an opportunity for me at the time, and embraced it, and sort of moved on. Which is sad because it was
quickly, didn't it?
Yeah, it well, when just to understand the history of that, right? The deal for that company was signed 2 weeks before the crash of 2008 or whatever it was.
Oh,
right?
yeah, brutal timing. Brutal timing.
So once again, VC involved, large expectations to revenue. You have a bunch of covenants in place against the capital available to go do that. It's the usual story with covenants, right? You don't make your nut, you don't get the cash.
Yeah.
So, if you overextend or you're making decisions on the anticipation of getting it, and then that doesn't materialize, guess what? It will go south very
brutal.
quickly.
That is brutal.
That's a risk on those sort of things. So, I was actually surprised they lasted as long as they did. because they actually were able to go. And I think Ted sort of reinvested in it at one point to go do it. But that
was such bad timing, though. Yeah, that was horrible.
Unfortunately, it was bad timing. It just
I know people who sold or bought companies like right at the end of 2019 or at the beginning of 2020. Like actually, who was it? Idis, when Idis still sold Mainlight, he told me right at the beginning of 2020, he took a huge delivery, and I forget which light fixture it was, but they were still sitting brand new in boxes when I talked to him about it, and this was like in 2021. I mean, literally sitting there for a year untouched, and probably by the time he gets to use them, they won't be the latest model anymore.
No, you're correct. Yeah, you've already depreciated and they got no value.
That is tough. Yeah,
no, it is. Yeah,
brutal.
Yep.
All right, Hamish. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. It's been fun. And have a great rest of the week. I guess it's Wednesday. Are you going to LDI, or you don't go to that?
I probably won't. I used to go there religiously all the time, but I've got so much going on here at POG with all the different shows. We're actually very busy right now. I've got a lot going on this particular week, which is good. So
Wiseman was telling me, I don't know, recently, he said it was one of the most brutal years I've had. But the next 18 months is like the biggest pipeline I've ever seen.
That's sort of, I think, what the hope is with all of us, right, is to see that change. I mean, for me, going back to, there needs to be a change also in the pricing as well.
Oh,
coming
hell
out of
yes.
This,
hell yes.
For everyone.
No.
It's like, I'm, we all need to see that, because it's like, going back to the old edges, I'm doing more work for less money doesn't work.
Well, and I mean, at least the larger companies have access to either public money or private equity money or whatever. Like, at least you have capital that you can access if you need to, as painful as it might be sometimes. But smaller companies, like I know $5 to $7 million companies that are going out of business left and right now.
Yeah, no, I actually
I
expect to see a slew of bankruptcies to come.
There's a bunch of them.
Well, you've also got the things too. Anyone that was able to obtain COVID, funding, some of that payments are coming due and stuff. So there's got to be.
But also buying gear like drunk sailors, right after COVID, because you had so many shows coming at you, and just going, I'll take 50 of those, I'll take 100 of those, and when you're a $10 million company, you can't be doing that stuff. You got to keep bootstrapping, boy.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's interesting when you talk about entrepreneurial things. It goes back to in that spot of where you're at in your growth period, where the cap, that's why VC and PC quite often has to be brought in, because you hit that threshold where you can no longer get the capital to continue what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you want to continue to do it, it's
so
hard.
true. But you're right. We need some pricing shift in the market for sure.
Yeah, we do.
And one person explained it to me recently, a small business operator, and he just said, look, I'm getting so much pressure now from customers who are saying, unless you'll give it to me for 2019 numbers, I'm going to get it from Christy Lights or from Four Wall or from PRG or from whoever will give me that price. I'm sorry. I know I've been renting it from you for 10 years, but unless you can do the show for 2019 pricing. And how do you do that and make money? You can't.
Nope.
You just can't. So have you seen the price of eggs?
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. It's
all right, Hamish.
All right, mate. Well,
thanks.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.